Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 118. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
All right, so before we begin tonight's episode, there was a recent development in Australia about a case we've covered in the past.
Oh, no kidding.
Do you remember the case about the Beaumont children, the 3 children who went missing from the beach? That was basically...
That was a very early case.
Very early, and they last week, and by the time you guys hear this out there in the real world, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they started excavating on a property again looking for bodies.
No kidding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was on property owned by one of their main suspects, the one that we called the Satin Man, the guy that wrote the book based it on.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one that I was pretty sure is probably guilty, but unfortunately they found nothing. And now the relatives of this guy are finally coming out and saying, you're just tarnishing his name after death. You should knock this off. It's a whole thing now.
Right.
So unfortunately, it didn't really lead to anything, but I wanted to throw that out there, that they are still heavily looking into the missing Beaumont children. And it would have been amazing had they found something.
Yeah, it would have.
Because, we talked about the Jack the Ripper last week, and the very likely possibility that they've figured out who did it, who he was, and it would have been amazing if they, right after that, figured out the Beaumont children thing. That would have been fucking amazing.
Yeah, it would have been quite a time for true crime.
Well, genetic genealogy has created a whole slew of possibilities, so I keep hoping for more.
Yeah.
Tonight, we are going to Iceland.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this one, let me just say I've spelled everything out phonetically because I'm going to need to.
Oh, boy.
It's definitely a tough language, so I'm equally excited to hear the story and your attempts at pronouncing things.
Well, again, phonetically, we're going to do our best.
I'm so proud of you already. You got this.
So what you're saying is ask you to repeat it 3 times.
Sounds
good.
Yeah, let's not. All right, so there's not really a big teaser on this one. I went through the case. I was looking for a good moment to pull out and put at the beginning to tease you into it. But unfortunately, anything I do that for is a spoiler for things that will come, and I decided not to do that.
All right, no spoilies.
Yeah, no teasers, no spoilers, only because I want you guys to, as things develop, I want your genuine reactions. I don't want to tell you something cool at the beginning just to have you be like, when you get to the moment, be like, no, okay, you said that earlier. So anyway.
Fair.
So Birna Brjansdottir was born on November 28th, 1996. She was 20 years old and a sales assistant, and she was described as a kind, fun-loving redhead with a great sense of humor. She lived in a town, and the main shopping street in this town, which the town was called Reykjavik, was the shop.
Nice job.
Thank you. The street that the shopping street was called Lugavager, or in some pronunciations, Loigavager. And I'm not sure which one is actually true, or if it's like a dialect thing, like a regional thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like up here in the northern part of the United States, we say oil, but in the southern parts of the United States, they'll say all. You know what I mean?
True.
So it could just be something like that. Now, this street is a street that Birna knew well. She's vivacious. She's 20. She's got her auburn hair. She's got a sharp sense of humor. She's out there having a good time, and she grew up just a 30-minute walk from where she's hanging out. She likes music, everything from hip-hop to folk. She liked to drive. So in the summer of 2016, which is when these events take place, she has embraced the Icelandic pastime called runtu, which is essentially cruising around the town, nice and slow, enjoying Lugavegar in her father's car with her friends. Her windows are down, speakers are blaring as she drives past coffee bars and boutiques. This is
Sounds like a blast.
It sounds like fun. And I'll be honest, we kind of do stuff like that here, but we just drive in circles around the downtowns of whatever towns we're in the U.S. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, but the difference there is it's winter and they're doing it, which is crazy.
Right. Well, they're a lot more badass than we are.
They really
They're
are.
tougher.
Yeah.
Their winters are so real. It's like there's not even any light.
Yeah, I was about to get to that. So that winter, when the sun only
Spoiler.
appears in the sky for 5 hours a day and the snow piles deep up on the nearby mountain, Birna's just still out there enjoying the nightlife and doing her thing. So after finishing work on a particular Friday, where she would often go out to this place where she would play cards at this pub with some friends, and then after midnight, when the people of Reykjavik are actually finally starting to party, she goes out dancing. And that's what they did on January 13th, 2017. Self-assured and carefree, Birna is one of the first people of the night to go out and get up and dance and have a good time at a place called Hura, a popular live music venue and club. Her friends decided it was time to go home around 2 a.m., but she told them that she was going to stay and continue partying. She left that club at closing time, which was 3 hours later at 5 a.m.
Oh.
They are really built different.
They really are. I'm like, I don't think there's a...
That's so Europe.
I was going to say there isn't a place even here in Boston where you can go out and the club doesn't close until 5 a.m.
No, it's
Absolutely
not
not.
even legal here because we're so Puritan.
Yeah, that's true too.
But anywhere in Europe I've been, and also like Puerto Rico, yeah, we used to call it. Oh, and I lived in Europe. The devil's 9 to 5 when you're partying from 9 to 5 at night.
Nice.
Oh my God.
That's a good time. Yeah.
It is.
So somehow after 5 a.m., and for all I know, this is when breakfast places are opening for the day, Birna goes and buys herself a falafel pita, and she starts walking slowly down Lugavegar, which is brightly lit at night with storefronts and lampposts bright, and every 10 meters or so are those lampposts. Now, walking alone, even for a young woman in this area, is not that unusual. And it's mostly because Icelanders feel like they know their own people. They don't feel unsafe.
Once again, drastically different from out here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, I guess there's probably some places here that people feel like that. But
I was going to say,
Hey,
there's
when you find one, let me know.
Well, I was going to say there's a town here in Massachusetts that is one of the top 20 safest towns in the entire country. There have been so few violent crimes in this particular town that it made this list. And that is, I think the town is Hopkinton, Mass, which is over by...
makes sense.
Not too far from...
Extremely rich.
Yeah, exactly. Not too far from Framingham, so not too far from us, to be honest.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive.
So this area is so peaceful that entire years go by without a single murder. And outside
That's
that...
nice. Imagine.
Right? Can you imagine? So that night, the temperature was -9 Celsius or 15 degrees Fahrenheit with the wind chill.
No.
Yeah, but she's walking down the street as if it's nothing, completely unperturbed.
Oh my God.
Wow.
She was wearing her Doc Marten boots, regular black ones, not her knee-high pair that had a glow-in-the-dark skeleton on the front of it.
Oh, what a badass. I
right?
love it.
She had black jeans on, a gray sweater, and a black hoodie draped over her shoulders. Her hair was hanging loose, and a pair of white earbuds dangled around her neck. Now, she was drunk, and camera footage does show her dropping coins at one point and bumping into a stranger on the pavement. She ambled past a yellow and red awning for a place called the Lebowski Bar, which was inspired by the Coen brothers film, The Big Lebowski.
I would hope
That's
so.
funny.
At that point, Birna disappears. Now, when she didn't show up for work that Saturday morning, her friend Maria raised an alarm. Birna was always on time. They worked in the fashion section of Hagkupt department store, and they'd known each other since primary school. They were close friends who used to watch Britain's Got Talent and go to music festivals together. So Maria called Birna's cell phone, but it was clearly not working. It was off, and her phone was never off. So Maria immediately contacted the friends of Birna that she went out with that night. And they assumed that she had gone back to her father's house, which is where she lived, but when they contact those there, Birna never made it home. So Maria then calls Birna's mother, Scylla, who was worried by what she was hearing. Now, her daughter was independent and strong-willed, but she was also responsible, and she always let her parents know where she was. So that evening, after filing a missing persons report with the police, Scylla posted a message on Facebook saying that her daughter had not come home and she was looking for anyone that had seen or heard from her since. She wrote, "Dear friends, it's not like her that we can't reach her. Please share and let's find her." Which is, honestly, I think what a lot of people do today, more so than ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So within a few hours, the post had been shared thousands of times, which is pretty damn impressive. But unfortunately, there was still no word from Birna. Her mother stayed awake the entire night that night, calling the emergency services every hour, sometimes every half an hour, to see if there was any updated news.
Oh, poor thing.
At 9 a.m. on Sunday, there was an update from police. Before Birna's phone had been turned off or ran out of power, whichever it was, at 5:50 a.m., it had pinged off a mobile tower in an industrial area in Hafnarfjordur, a port town 6 miles south of Reykjavik, known for its lava fields and Viking festivals. Which sounds amazing.
Sound badass.
Right? That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So Scylla drove there with some relatives and several of her daughter's friends, knocking on doors and calling Birna's name. So by early afternoon, with the light fading fast, because again, only 5 hours of daylight, Scylla was desperate. Her daughter had not been seen for nearly 36 hours, and she was convinced that something horrible had gone wrong. And there was still nothing about an official search. So without evidence of foul play, the police were actually reluctant to act. But the media finally picked up the story. And when the two main
That's how you get 'em.
Yep. And when the two main television stations called requesting interviews, Scylla agreed. So the mystery of the young woman who disappeared from Reykjavik's best-known street appeared on the Sunday evening bulletins. And with a small town, mostly, homogeneous population of only 340,000 people and a high degree of economic equality, Iceland is one of the world's safest nations. It's the only member of NATO that doesn't actually have a standing army, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Now, gun ownership is high in this country. There's an estimated 90,000 firearms in civilian hands, but the weapons there are purchased for hunting rather than self-defense and are very seldom misused. So violent crime is rare. Yeah,
how it should be. I love that.
For example, between 2000 and 2015, there was an average of 1.6 murders a year, where most of the perpetrators and victims were young men that knew each other. And in the year 2008, there wasn't even a single homicide in the entire country.
Wow.
That is impressive as
Yeah,
hell.
when you look at us, it's tens of thousands.
Economic equality does crazy things.
Right? The police there are not armed, and the Reykjavik's police force's Instagram page shows officers eating ice cream and sledding and posting selfies. So
Seriously?
Yeah, that's their police force's Instagram feed.
Wow. So they're not exactly trained very well to deal with homicide, probably.
Probably not, exactly. So the feeling of security is bolstered by Icelanders' tendencies to look out for one another, a tradition that dates back to times when close collaboration was essential to make it through long, brutal winters. So, Detective Groomer Grimson did not watch television at all. So he literally he was unaware of the disappearance, and he was out finishing dinner with his wife when his phone rang. It was his supervisor telling him about the missing woman, and he then had to call his police headquarters in Reykjavik to determine that he actually needed to come in for it. Because presumably, kind of like what they do here, they're assuming a missing person is just going to turn up.
Right.
They're not so much a runaway there, are they?
No, I would assume not. So Grimson has 30 years of experience on the police force, and he did not spend that time just eating ice cream. He's one of the few well-trained people in the area. In the 90s, he had been based in the northern West Fjords region near the Arctic Circle, where several avalanches had struck, killing more than 30 people. In early 2009, during their financial crash, he joined a special prosecutor's office and spent 6 years building cases against the managers and traders whose market manipulation and fraudulent loans helped bring down Iceland's biggest 3 banks. So basically,
Wow.
yeah, he did the thing there that America should have done here when our market crashed.
Truly.
So in November of 2016, having missed the quote-unquote faster beat of regular police work, he then returned to the city of Reykjavik and their police force. So that Sunday evening, he's driving to the to his police station, but he wasn't overly worried because, as we just said, each month several people are reported missing in Iceland, usually hunters or hikers that get lost in hostile areas, youngsters running away from home or involved with drugs, or people with Alzheimer's, sometimes suicide victims. In urban areas, young people missing usually turn up quickly after having spent the night at a friend's house, as Birna often did, or hooking up with someone for the night. So he wasn't overly concerned. So once he got to the headquarters, Grimson was debriefed on the case, and officers had collected a sample of Birna's clothing from her father's house to give tracking dogs her scent, and the dogs had then been taken to the spot where she was last seen. Reykjavik had very sparse CCTV cameras. Like most European capitals, there's quite a bit. But because of the low crime rate and low violence in their country, they didn't really have a lot going on. So there were very few camera angles that they could get, anything that they could see. But the officers were able to piece together grainy footage showing Birna's movements after leaving the club that night, or that morning if you think about it. Grimson watched her drop coins and bump into a stranger before walking past the Lebowski bar. But in the footage of the next camera, 1 block away, there was no sign of her. Either she had gone down a side road or had climbed into a passing vehicle. So scrutinizing the video again, Grimson and his colleagues noticed a small red car, a Kia Rio, traveling in the opposite direction to Birna. It drove past the Lebowski bar less than 30 seconds after she had disappeared from the camera there. So they're asking themselves, did she get in that car? And they're like, it's possible. Now, unfortunately, the video quality was not sharp enough to identify the occupants in the vehicle or even get the license plate number. And when police checked the National Vehicle Database, they found that more than 100 people owned a car of that same make, model, and color. Which here...
Yeah, that's tough. But also, like, only 100?
Well, I was going to say,
solid.
Here, 100 doesn't sound like a lot because, like, the city of, Boston has more people than the entire country of Iceland.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, yes, it's only 100.
That really puts stuff in perspective.
Yeah, because it's crazy. If you think about the fact that New York probably has, 6-7 times that many people? That's crazy. Yeah, New York is stacked on top of each other like poker chips, but at least in Iceland, I don't know. It's crazy. So, yeah, so only 100, but that's still a lot of their population.
Fair, yeah, and given what their resources probably are to investigate.
So at 2 a.m. on Sunday night, Scylla and Birna's father, Brjan, who were divorced but on good terms, arrived at the police headquarters. Scylla pleaded to be taken seriously and for an immediate search to begin. Birna had no reason to go missing. She insisted that she stayed close to her family and she didn't get involved in drugs. She wasn't depressed. One of her friends actually described her as a happy pill because she was so invariably upbeat. And nor did Birna have any money concerns. Her income from her department store job was more than enough, as she had told her mother. So what was more precious to her mother was the fact that time was slipping by. So when Grimson showed them the CCTV footage, Scylla was furious that they could not identify the red car's plate. She said to him, "Can't you find it like in the movies?"
Zoom enhance.
Right, exactly. And Grimson had to tell her that, no, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, unfortunately not real.
Yeah, right. And the fact that the idea that everyone in Iceland knew each other was also something of a stretch, because no one in Iceland, no one could just look at that car and be like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's car, obviously.
Right.
I mean, 300, almost 400,000 people is still a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So by Monday afternoon, with no further leads, the police sought to tap into the spirit that everyone in Iceland cared about each other, and they called a rare press conference to appeal for information to help locate Birna and identify the driver of the red car. So despite feeling that the police were still treating her like a hysterical mother, Scylla agreed to appear beside Grimson at the press conference, but he, had been assigned to take the lead, so he expected her to just stand there and show public support. Now, she told reporters that she feared for her daughter, who loved speaking English, because she could speak English, and she loved to travel. Birna and Maria, her friend, were planning a trip to New York City in two months after this, and she might have actually stopped to speak to tourists on her way home if they were speaking English or knew anything about New York City. She added that Birna had recently joined Tinder after a breakup with a boyfriend, and she thought maybe that would be a reason she might be meeting someone and having disappeared on the street. Which, God, I hope not. If you're meeting someone on Tinder and they're like, I'll pick you up at 5 a.m., that's crazy. Run.
Yeah, that's
while
when you turn
you're
around
drunk.
and run.
Yeah, don't get into that car. Grimson gave an update on the search, which was being led by the Icelandic Association for Search and Rescue, otherwise known as ICESAR, a sprawling network of well-trained emergency response volunteers. Now, the roots of this group go back 100 years, and its continued existence reflects the reality of the main dangers in this island nation, because it's harsh, and they're rather unforgiving if you really don't know what you're doing out there. So generally, having ordinary citizens, as opposed to people on ICESAR, involved in a search for a missing person is a hindrance. Because, as police said, when you have people out there who don't know what they're doing, they're only in danger themselves.
Yeah, and then you're going to be rescuing a bunch of civilians instead of doing the search.
Right? Can you imagine? But just a few hours after the press conference, late on Monday night, it led to a breakthrough. Two brothers in their 20s, with no connection to ICESAR or to Birna, went looking for her in Hafnarfjordur, where the last signal of her phone had been picked up. On a whim, they headed to the harbor. Between the road and the sea was a fenced-off area with 3 large oil storage tanks, and next to that was a patch of rough ground littered with building supplies. The brothers decided to go and take a look around. Along some pipes, they spotted a pair of black boots. As the missing persons release had described, Birna was wearing black combat boots. So as they approached, they Googled Doc Martens to see, and the resemblance of what they saw on their search matched the boots that they were looking at on the ground.
Yeah, they're very distinctive.
So they immediately called it in, and officers rushed to that port. The boots were quickly ascertained to have belonged to Birna.
Uh-oh.
That sucks.
So divers plunged into the icy waters, and they used drones hovering above, and Grimson's officers pored over all the CCTV footage around the docks. They soon spotted a red Kia Rio entering the harbor shortly before 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. The car parked along a 65-meter fishing trawler called the Polar Nagok, sailing under a flag for Greenland. The men exited the passenger door and slowly and drunkenly walked onto that ship. Then the car drove off, but this time the number plate was legible.
Okay.
It was a rental vehicle, which the company said had been hired by a crew member of the Polar Nagok, Thomas Olsen, a 25-year-old man from Greenland. He had returned the vehicle at lunchtime on Saturday, and it had since been hired out again to a different family. Police ran out, found the car, and impounded it. The car had obviously been cleaned recently, and the family that had rented it after those men had complained about strong chemical smells.
Uh-oh.
There's a telltale
Yup.
sign.
Yep. On closer inspection, officers found traces of blood in the back seat.
Oh.
Yeah.
How spooky to be that family that rented the car right after.
Right? Can you fucking imagine? Since Iceland lacks a sophisticated forensic crime lab, a sample was sent to Sweden for analysis along with some of Birna's DNA, which I'm assuming they got from something in her house, like a hairbrush or something.
Mm-hmm.
So the hunt was on for Thomas Olsen and the other man seen walking from the car to the ship that Saturday morning. Unfortunately, the trawler had set sail Saturday afternoon with both men on board.
Hmm.
Now, by that Tuesday, 3 days after Birna disappeared, the Polar Nagok was many hundreds of miles away fishing off of Greenland. Since leaving Iceland, Thomas Olsen and his companion from the car, Nicola Olsen, not related, who was also from Greenland, had seemed their usual selves on the ship. But then Thomas, who is described by his crewmates as likable and easygoing, received a message on his phone that made him visibly agitated. A news reporter in Reykjavik who had learned that the Polar Nagok had been linked to Birna's disappearance had discovered a Facebook group used by the crew and sent a speculative message to Thomas asking if he knew who had rented a red Kia Rio.
Oh, boy.
Fucking,
This is a reporter doing this?
yes, fucking idiots.
Idiot.
Yep. Now, Thomas had gone pale. He showed the journalist message to the ship's captain, and the captain told him that he didn't have anything to worry about if he hadn't done anything wrong, and he gave him some sedatives to calm him down. For Grimson's team, the pursuit of the two sailors presented a major logistical and diplomatic challenge.
Right, now they're in another country.
Yeah, the Coast Guard helicopter had flown 4 police officers to a Danish warship called the Triton. But because the Polar Nagok was a Greenlandic vessel in Greenland's water, the plan was to sail to Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, speak to local police officers there, and take them to the Polar Nagok to try to make arrests.
Why
Grimson,
do they have to sail to talk to the police?
I don't know. You'd think that maybe they won't take them seriously via call. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I don't know. That's weird.
That's an interesting question, yeah. So Grimson's concern was time. The longer the suspects were at large, the more opportunity they would have to destroy evidence and coordinate their stories. Then Grimson received some news that allowed for a swifter and simpler solution. The captain of the Polar Nagok, who had read online that the ship had been linked to a disappearance and was concerned his men might be implicated, decided to turn the ship around and sail back to Iceland.
Holy
That's
crap.
a really honorable person.
Yep.
Wow.
He and the senior crew agreed that they would tell Thomas and Nicola that the engine had malfunctioned, necessitating the turnaround. The captain then turned off the Wi-Fi so the two men were unable to read any more media reports about the case.
That's awesome. Good.
I'm impressed.
What a badass.
That
For
is
real.
awesome.
That's wow. And they don't know anything other than like it's just suspicious. Like wow.
Correct. Yeah, it's impressive as fuck.
Right.
So-
And I guess also you don't want to not cooperate when it's your boat that's been
Right? Can you imagine
identified.
if that was so? Now flip this. Imagine this was a boat that had left the United States with possibly with a U.S. citizen on board. Holy fuck! We'd have sank
no
it.
kidding.
we would have sank that thing. Would have had 3 submarines pull up next to it.
Literally.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so although Iceland does not have any special forces, it does have an elite counter-terror unit within the police called Vikinggasviking, which means the Viking Squad.
Oh, let's fucking go.
That's
Right?
awesome.
Fucking A. Like, Iceland's got some cool shit. I'm going to say that right now. I've
They
never...
got a lot of cool shit. I want to go there.
I was going to say, I've
I don't
never
even think
been, but I
could
want
be
to
mad
go.
about being taken down by the Viking squad.
Right? Especially Vikings from Iceland. That's just badass.
Yeah, that rocks.
So early the next morning, which was Wednesday, 6 members of the Viking squad boarded an A332 Super Puma helicopter and flew out to meet the Polar Nagak as it crossed into Icelandic waters. Although the weather was bad and the sea was rough, with 8-meter waves, the officers...
Ooh, 8 meters?
8-meter waves. That's crazy. That's what, 25 feet?
Yeah.
Ooh.
The officers safely rappelled to the deck of the ship, and Nikolai and Thomas were arrested and confined to their cabins.
Wow.
Yeah.
In 12 hours, the Polar Nagak would reach Hafnarfjordur. By now, all of Iceland was following the story with an increasing sense of foreboding. Parents who had never before needed to explain the dangers of crime to their children struggled to answer the questions their children had about the missing woman and the sailors.
Oh, that's awful.
In the cafes and bars of Reykjavik, people checked for updates on news sites and swapped theories about what they thought might have happened. Other instances of violent crime, rare as they were not mysteries that needed solving or requiring manhunts. This one was unfolding in real time like the plot of a novel or a movie and became even more popular in Iceland over the past decade. Like it was nothing else captivated this country.
Wow.
This is a quote from someone named Helgi Gunnlaugsson, a sociology professor at the University of Iceland. He said, "It represents the fear in our society, a young innocent woman targeted in the downtown area. And then the suspects were outsiders, and that only intensified it." Unquote.
Yeah, for real.
Which, you got to be honest, like, this the fact that one of their own, an innocent young woman, is taken by someone outside, that must just stir up more distrust of foreigners. You know?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. So the public's strong reaction was mostly well-intentioned, passing on potential clues to police and empathy for Birna's family, and that was appreciated by most people. The National Broadcasting Service had even postponed the airing of a second series of a BBC drama called The Missing, about a girl who disappears, out of respect for the family and friends of Birna. So they weren't...
Wow.
That's awesome. That they weren't even going to put on a TV show that was fictionalizing the same thing. It would never happen here.
Yeah, that's like so considerate.
But
The only time they do something like that is for like 9/11, when they had like the huge list of songs you couldn't play on the radio after that because they like vaguely said something about flying.
Right. And there was also a scene that was taken, they reshot for the first Spider-Man movie where, because, the first Spider-Man movie released in 2002. And originally in the script, Spider-Man was supposed to create a web to catch up in between the Twin Towers to catch
Lord.
a plane. Yeah. So that...
Oh my god. Yeah, no, gotta
that one
reshoot
had
that
to be
one.
taken out. Yeah.
Yep. Oh man.
Can you imagine if that had released like the week before? Like, Oh my God.
Oh, the
Good
premonition.
God.
People would have lost their shit. There would have
Yeah.
been even more 9/11 conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that Stan Lee was responsible.
Yeah, somehow.
Oh my God.
Well, you know what's sad is here we wouldn't postpone anything. We would create shows
Yeah, that's true
and
too.
documentaries and films and
Well,
all kinds of stuff
it-
about this
yeah,
if it happened here.
well, I mean, it does happen here all the time. And yes, there are some people that take it too far. You know, like when Gabby Petito was missing before she was found dead, there was a lot of theories, a lot of shit going on. But unfortunately, here it happens all the time. In Iceland, it happens so rarely that it becomes a whole national sensation, which should put in perspective how desensitized the United States citizens are.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were also many citizens playing amateur detectives, and as a result, rumors were spreading online. Late the previous night, Grimson had sent officers to the port to dispel reports on social media that a body had been found in a lake. And now there was fresh speculation that Birna was alive and on the Polar Nagak, and that several other abducted women had also been found on board. Grimson...
That's some really creative storytelling, huh?
It is, but it's almost believable. Like, if you think about it, like, could you imagine this fishing trawler just being used as a, I don't know, like a mule for human trafficking? It's simple in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Like
But if she was on board, wouldn't they know that?
by now, yeah, because they're on the boat and the people are arrested. Yeah, you think they'd figured it out. But again, this is on people online creating this. Yeah.
Fair enough. The internet, not always everyone telling the truth on there.
Really?
I know. It's groundbreaking. It's hard for me to believe, too.
I know. We should do a whole podcast about that.
Oh,
People
God.
lying on the internet.
We'd be here forever. Oh, my God. So Grimson, whose composure, focus, and openness when updating the public had endeared himself to many Icelanders, appealed for calm and urged people to avoid a mob fever. When the Polar Nagak was just hours away, the harbor was sealed off to keep the public at a distance. The port was blanketed in snow, and red and blue uniformed Ice SAR volunteers quietly continued their search for evidence. More than a dozen police vehicles were parked in a line on the dock, with their lights on when the ship finally sailed into view at 11 p.m. on that Wednesday night.
Wow.
Quote, "You had this feeling that all the police cars in Reykjavik were there," said one of the reporters covering the case. Viking squad officers led Thomas and Nicola off the ship in handcuffs, and the reporter said it was a really powerful moment. There's always this chance that maybe they had lost the suspects en route. Which would have been fucking nuts. They just somehow
Yeah,
dove
they're like,
overboard.
they found out, they tossed him off.
Which would be even better. Oh my God. They made him walk the plank, right? After days of unrelenting bad news about the case, Icelanders at last had a small measure of relief. That the men arrested were foreigners, and that kind of provided an extra level of comfort to some of the citizens of Iceland. Which, I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. So the police convoy sped to the headquarters in Reykjavik, where the questioning began immediately. Forensic tests in Sweden had revealed that the blood in the car was in fact Birna's, and both men, being interviewed separately, denied causing her any harm. Their accounts of what happened that previous Friday night and the first part of Saturday morning basically were similar up until Nicola was dropped off at the ship. Now, the Polar Nagak had arrived from Denmark on January 11th, 2017, which was a Wednesday, to pick up a fresh crew, and then on that Friday, a few of those men remaining on board decided to go out for the night on the town before heading back to sea. Now, Nicola supposedly, this is what he's saying, took a taxi from the port to Reykjavik and went for a drink at an English pub off of Lugavegur. He paid 2,500 krona for a game called The Spin of the Lucky Wheel, which is a game of chance with a grand prize of 8 beers, which he won. Now, by the time,
jeez.
right? I'm assuming he's sharing these. At least I hope he is.
I would hope.
You know, it is Iceland. There's not else a lot to do, so I suppose you're going to drink a lot of beers.
Probably better drinkers than we are.
And certainly better than I am.
Yeah, same.
By the time Thomas had driven the rental car to the capital and joined Nicola was already very drunk. They later moved to another bar before going for a drive and ending up on Lugavegar, where the red Kia Rio was captured on the CCTV at the same time that Birna disappeared. Both men claimed that 2 women entered the car at that point, although Nicola said he had fallen asleep on the way to the port and recalled nothing about them. Thomas told police that after dropping Nicola off at the Polar Nagak shortly before 6 a.m., he had parked at the end of the harbor and climbed into the back seat of this car, which was quite tiny, with the 2 women, one of whom was Birna, whom he claimed he had kissed. He said he dropped the women off at a nearby roundabout or rotary about an hour later.
Not back in the city? What the fuck?
Right? You're just going to drop them off at a random intersection?
Yeah, that seems really, really weird.
6 a.m. on January something, you know what I mean? I don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't, sus.
So to police, Nicola's vagueness seemed plausible, because from the CCTV footage at the harbor, they could see how drunk he was. But Thomas's account was obviously full of holes. At 7 a.m. on Saturday, when he was seen on camera driving away from the harbor, his phone had been turned off for 4 hours. The car was not seen on any surveillance footage again until 11 a.m. when Thomas returned to the port. He said that he had slept in the car during that time, although the odometer reading suggested that he had taken a very long drive. Soon after, he was captured on video buying cleaning liquid, cloths, and plastic bags at a supermarket, and then was seen scrubbing the inside of the car.
That's just routine maintenance, right?
Well, he claimed...
Yeah, I always clean my rental car.
He claimed that he was trying to remove vomit from the back seat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so what about the blood, bestie?
Right? But after the rental car had been impounded and the blood sample taken for testing, a forensic officer sprayed the interior of the vehicle with luminol, which for those who don't know is a chemical that glows bright when it comes into contact with blood and other fluids. And even those that have been...
I love your hesitation there.
It was done on purpose. And even though like vehicles that had already been cleaned up, they will find fluids that are invisible to the naked eye. And this investigator said that the car lit up. So
it would be cool just to see that happen. Like, I don't know. I would love to be there and watch luminol work.
I mean, I'm assuming it's like turning on a black light at a club.
Yeah.
You know, like
probably.
If you go to the right kind of club, you better have clean fucking clothes on. Because even if you've got like an old like barbecue sauce stain, you're going to look like an asshole. Yeah. I remember being, I was in my 20s. I was in the Marine Corps. We went out to a club. And I didn't think, we were just doing our thing, you know, and we went out to a club. And all of a sudden, this black light's everywhere. And I looked down at my shirt and I had to like zip up my jacket because I didn't realize how like sloppy I was until that moment.
Yeah.
So other evidence also weighed against Thomas. The doctor who had examined him noted that he had scratches on his chest, indicative of a struggle. Meanwhile, officers searching his cabin in the Polar Nagak had found 13 kilograms of hashish and with a street value of 1.4 million British pounds, which I didn't bother to look up. Yeah, that's a lot.
That sounds like a crap ton.
It is.
That's very interesting to me. That doesn't sound like enough.
23 kilos? That's like 40 something pounds of hash.
Right. But it's like, hash costs that much? I guess I've never
I
purchased
was
it
gonna
before
say,
because I think it's garbage.
but I was gonna say, I guess it depends on the quality, right? So,
Yeah. But yeah.
but
Who am
more,
I to say?
but more importantly, they discovered Birna's driver's license folded and discarded in the ship's rubbish bin.
Well, there it is.
Yep. So the license was sent to a crime lab in Norway for fingerprint analysis. Grimson was certain that Thomas was responsible for Birna's disappearance, but he was still no closer to finding her. On the morning of Saturday 21st of January, a week after she vanished, the biggest search operation in Iceland's history began. IceSAR alone deployed 835 volunteers and 87
Holy
vehicles.
crap.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge response for such a small country.
Yeah.
So
That's got to be all their resources.
pretty much, right? Like each
Everybody's in on this.
town's got one cop sitting there going, "I hope nothing goes wrong."
Yeah.
Across the entire island/country, people waited anxiously for updates. One person said, "Today she is our sister and our daughter." He said, "We don't live in a society where we tolerate a 20-year-old woman being abducted in the night." So the vast search area included Iceland's southern peninsula with its lava fields, snowy hills, and frozen lakes. The first day of searching yielded nothing, but around noontime the following day, a Coast Guard helicopter flying low over a desolate coastline neared a bright orange lighthouse. There was no beach there, only a berm of large black stones littered with fishing buoys, buoys, thank you, littered with fishing buoys and driftwoods from distant lands. An officer on board the helicopter spotted something near the water's edge. It was Birna's body.
Oh, no.
Shock quickly gave way to grief. Memorials were held in Greenland, whose citizens had followed the case with horror and shame, in Denmark and all the major cities in Iceland as well. In Reykjavik, thousands of people walked together down Laugavegur, leaving candles and flowers at the spot where Birna had disappeared. Her funeral was held at the Hallgrímskirkja, the biggest church in the country, with the president and prime minister among the 2,000 mourners.
Wow.
Birna's friends carried the white coffin that she would be buried in.
Oh, that's
That's
heartbreaking.
tragic.
For weeks, Birna's mother was too devastated to hear the details of how her daughter died. In March of that
That's
year.
fair enough. Like, take your time.
Exactly. In March of that year, she asked to meet with Grimson and the chief of Reykjavik Metropolitan Police, who were eager to give her some closure and told her what they knew. They told her that although Birna was found naked, there was no evidence of a sexual assault. She had been struck.
Okay, that's good.
She had been struck in the face and strangled at the harbor, where Thomas was seen on camera entering the back of the car before his phone was turned off and he drove away from the port. But they believed that she was still alive when he put her in the water.
Oh, that's so awful.
The autopsy revealed that her cause of death was drowning.
Oh,
Oh.
Fucking crazy.
Drowning and like freezing at the same time.
Right, and you gotta wonder, I mean, I don't know what would be worse. I guess like if the freezing part you're not gonna feel much, but the drowning, I hear drowning's fucking, like, people describe it as one of the worst ways to go.
Yeah, it's just awful.
So Nicola had been released after 2 weeks in custody when police concluded that he was not present when the crime was committed. Despite the evidence against him, Thomas did not confess, sticking to the same story through 9 different police interviews.
wow, that's impressive.
Well, it is, but it isn't. I mean, if you're going to lie, you're going to stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but normally after, 2 or 3, something starts to change, or you slip up or something.
Yeah, you start to get tired. So I guess his resolve is
Yeah.
kind of impressive. I think that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yes.
Police still had no idea why Birna got into the car on Lugaveger or why he killed her. So on March 30th, 2017, Thomas was charged with the murder and with drug possession. When his trial began in August, the prosecution's case was even stronger. His DNA had been found on the laces of Birna's boots, and Norwegian forensic scientists had identified his fingerprint on her driver's license. So entering the courtroom, Thomas covered his face and sat facing away from the gallery. He confessed to the drug possession, but not to murder. Speaking in a low voice and without emotion, he spun a completely new story.
Of course he did.
This time, instead of 2 girls in the car, now there was only one, Birna, who he said had suddenly climbed into the Kia Rio as he drove along Lugaveger. Thomas said...
Oh, so now he didn't kiss her?
Well, hold on. That's just her getting in the vehicle. He said that he stopped the car and got out to take a piss at the port, at which point Nikolai drove off with Birna, returning sometime later without her to pick him up again. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
just throwing his friend under the bus.
So, to the astonishment in everyone in the court, Thomas was trying at this late stage to pin the murder on his crewmate.
Actually insane.
Fucking nuts.
Desperation.
Fucking nuts. A month later, 3 judges convicted Thomas on both charges and sentenced him to 19 years in prison, which in my opinion is not long enough, but I understand some countries...
I was going to say, that's it?
They must have so little murder that they don't have a robust law system to deal with it.
Right. A lot of countries, their life sentences aren't that long. Like, I don't even think they have life sentences in some cases. So.
Wow.
Right. And maybe they believe in the rehabilitative power of their prisons.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, who knows? Because they don't have that many murders. So
right.
Maybe
I wonder how big their prisons are.
Right. And maybe it actually works over there.
Yeah. If I would believe that it works anywhere, it would be there.
Yeah. So Thomas appealed against his conviction, asking the court for an independent assessor to analyze whether it was possible for him to have disposed of Birna's body given the ocean currents and the mileage on the rental car. Fucking
wow.
Incredibly
asshole.
weak.
Yeah. What an asshole. But anyway, as far as that, there's no more information on that, so I'm assuming it didn't go anywhere. So there's that. So one thing that Icelanders asked themselves after Birna's death was, did her murder change Iceland? And superficially, the answer is no. There has been little new animus towards outsiders. Even fishermen and young people have not stopped going out of their way, going out and getting drunk. Like, nothing's really changed on the surface. On a clear, cold night in March, the bars and clubs in downtown Reykjavik are still busy with British and American tourists, watching soccer in an English pub and, everybody just going out and having a good time. But ask any Icelander and they will tell you that something did shift. They say this case will be remembered because of something that the chaplain said that conducted Birna's funeral. He said it changed them a bit. They feel like their sense of security has been damaged. And now that city of Reykjavik has more CCTV cameras than they did before. Mm-hmm. So they argue that they've kind of lost a sense of privacy as they've given up to having more surveillance. Young women...
That is tough.
And they say young women in particular are more weary and more careful when they go out at night and they know they need to look out for one another, which I wish they had been doing already. But it's almost like they had to experience this to kind of grow up a little bit. They can't be naive anymore.
Yeah, sometimes it's learning the hard way.
Right. Although what a reality it would be to live in where you never even had to think about that.
Right. And it's too bad that we do, that women in particular do. But
yeah, it's hard to imagine feeling safe by yourself as a woman.
Right. because you're almost never safe anywhere you are, as this podcast proves time and time and time again.
Yeah. That's sad.
Catching a lift from strangers at night on a night out had become commonplace in Iceland, and especially through Facebook through a group called Skutlarar, which means those who give rides to people somewhere.
I love that.
But after Birna's death, a female-only version of that was established. Which, good. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And they say the biggest effect may be on the national psyche. The murder coincided with a period of strong economic growth driven by outside forces. There was a tourism boom, an influx of immigrants to take up low-level jobs, and foreign investments. People say that they think many people feel overwhelmed by how fast the country was changing from a small island nation to something more cosmopolitan, and that Birna's death somehow encapsulated people's unease about this new era. So Grimson has moved on from the first and possibly only murder case he'll ever lead, one that turned him into a national hero. He is now based in The Hague as Iceland's representative to the EU's Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation.
Oh, wow.
I know, that's a pretty big promotion.
Yeah.
He said that he was proud of the investigation, but wishes his forces had been quicker to respond to Scylla's desperate pleas for a search for her daughter. He said, "One of the things I have been thinking about a lot is this. Should it be 24 hours to respond to a missing persons case, or more subjective?" And we say that all the time. Like, why are they waiting?
Right. Well, we've talked about it on other episodes about like just how many of these cases end up being a runaway or any other thing that's not actually a big deal. It's hard to say being in their shoes.
Right, because you only have so many resources, and oftentimes they are found the next day. But I still think that no matter what, they should immediately be taken seriously. You know, especially if it's a young woman or a child. You know, not to be sexist, but if I go missing, I can understand the police saying, wait a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if a 20-year-old girl or a teenager or a child goes missing, there should be no reason for any delays.
Yeah.
So Scylla did not attend the trial and later made an appeal in the media for people not to refer to the murder as the Birna case. She said, "I don't want this evil act to be blended with her name. Birna was a beautiful soul. She did not deserve this."
No. I respect that.
Yeah. A picture of Birna hangs in a chain around Scylla's neck. Her focus is now keeping the positive memory of her daughter alive. In her living room, one entire wall is devoted to Birna. Like her daughter was, Scylla is generous and warm, and she speaks her mind. Now, although she is grateful for the public support, she rejected the idea to have an annual Memorial Day in Birna's name to promote unity, and dismisses the notion that some good has resulted from the tragedy. She has said...
That is also very fair.
Yeah, she has said, "There is no purpose in this. It makes me crazy when people talk about the country coming together. That's a fantasy. This country, this beautiful country in the frozen north where everybody comes together, I don't think it's healthy for Iceland to think of itself as special in that way." Unquote.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I'm not picking on her at all. I think she's a little bitter, but it's understandable.
Yeah.
You know, I understand her anger, and I know I probably would have been at that dock waiting to kill those men.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You would have.
I would have. They would have had to have locked me up before then.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, but that is the case of Birna Brjansdottir.
That was a whirlwind of a case. Holy crud.
And that's what I mean. There was no good teaser for that. I really wanted to talk about the helicopter landing on the ship or the fact that they were in like another country's water. But I'm like, how do you tell that without ruining where this is going?
You can't.
Yeah.
There's just so much depth to that case.
It's crazy. And initially I thought this was going to be a much shorter case that was going to end up on the roulette episode. But once I dug in, I was like, this is so crazy.
No,
yeah,
I'm
it
glad you
deserves a
did.
full episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it certainly
there was a good
does.
story that needed to be told.
And obviously we're going to post photos on the Instagram, but Birna was absolutely stunning. Like it's crazy how, and I know we say this, like no one deserves to be abducted and murdered, but like when it's like this young, beautiful person with a whole life ahead of them, it's even more tragic because it's like predators always go after the best of us somehow. They
Yeah.
always know. It's so fucked up. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our first ever case in Iceland. And obviously we won't have too many because like Antarctica, there aren't many murders there.
Yeah.
But-
And, thank God for that. I'm glad that it hasn't resulted in all of a sudden like crime happening all the time there.
Agreed. And I, like you said earlier, you have never been. I want to go. It seems like a beautiful country. I know parts of Game of Thrones was filmed there, so that alone makes me want to go. So
You can
I
see the
agree.
Northern Lights from there. That's why I want to go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
yeah, I think that'd be funny. We take an unsung murder ballads vacation to Iceland.
To go
Yeah.
see the
Right.
Northern Lights.
And then we'll stop at Adelaide, Australia, since we've done so many cases from there.
Yes, world tour.
Yeah, completely a half a world away.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone, thank you again for joining us. Once again, I am Janus Dead,
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
and we'll see you next week.
Bye.